It was a chilly autumn evening when Mark first noticed something strange in the neighborhood. The quiet, tree-lined streets of his suburban town had always been peaceful, but that night, an unsettling silence hung in the air. It wasn't just the cold breeze that made him uneasy, it was the feeling that something was watching him. Mark had just returned from work and was taking his usual evening jog. His dog, Duke, a loyal German shepherd, trotted alongside him. The pair had shared years of companionship, and this routine jog was one of their favorite moments of the day. But Duke was acting odd that night. His ears perked up, and he kept glancing into the dark woods that bordered their route. His normally energetic and playful demeanor was replaced with something more cautious, almost nervous. As they passed the old McPherson farm, Duke stopped suddenly, growling low and deep. His hackles were raised, and his eyes were locked on something hidden in the shadows beyond the rusted gate. Mark tugged at his leash, but Duke wouldn't budge. Something had caught his attention, and whatever it wasn't good. "Come on, Duke, let's go," Mark urged, but Duke's growl grew louder. Suddenly, from the darkened field, a figure emerged. A dog, or at least what used to be a dog. It was thin, emaciated, with matted fur and glowing eyes that reflected the faint moonlight. Its skin hung loosely on its bones, and its once muscular frame looked ravaged by decay. The stench hit Mark before the sight could fully register, a foul, rotting odor that turned his stomach. The creature let out a low, guttural growl, a sound so unnatural it sent a shiver down Mark's spine. Duke barked fiercely, pulling on the leash, but Mark held him back. He didn't know what they were dealing with, but every instinct screamed to turn and run. Without warning, the decaying dog lunged. It moved with terrifying speed, despite its rotting body. Mark yanked Duke back, barely avoiding the creature's snapping jaws. The two scrambled down the road, Mark's heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the beast's ragged breathing behind them, its paws scraping against the asphalt. They ran for what felt like miles, but the creature didn't give up. Duke, normally the fastest dog in the neighborhood, was struggling to keep pace, clearly unnerved by the unnatural predator on their tail. Mark's legs burned and his lungs ached, but fear pushed him forward. Finally, they reached the safety of their home. Mark slammed the door shut and locked it, leaning against it to catch his breath. Duke, panting heavily, stayed by the window growling at the darkness outside. Mark peered through the curtains, hoping the creature had given up. But there, just beyond the streetlight, the zombie dog stood, its glowing eyes fixed on their house, watching, waiting. Its decayed body quivered with a sickening hunger, but it didn't approach. It just watched. For the next few days, Mark didn't venture outside after dark. The creature was always there, lurking just out of sight. Neighbors began reporting strange sightings, missing pets, and eerie howls that echoed through the night. The local authorities dismissed it as wild animals, but Mark knew better. One night, as Mark sat in his living room trying to make sense of the strange events, Duke began growling again. This time it was different, more urgent. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the backyard. Mark grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made his way to the back door. Duke stayed close, growling low and deep. As Mark shone the light across the yard, his heart stopped. There, standing in the shadows, was another dog, or what was left of one. Its body was twisted and broken, its eyes glowing with the same unnatural light as the creature they had encountered days before. But this wasn't just any dog. Mark recognized the torn collar around its neck, the name tag glinting faintly in the light. It was Duke. His loyal companion, his friend, now stood before him, a hollow shell of what he had once been. The real Duke, the one standing beside Mark, let out a pitiful whimper, as if he too understood the horror of what was happening. The zombie Duke let out a low growl, its glowing eyes locking onto Mark. It began to stalk forward, its movements slow but deliberate. The real Duke barked, his fur standing on end, but he stayed by Mark's side. Mark's mind raced. This was impossible. How could there be two of them? Suddenly, the zombie dog lunged, teeth bared and snarling. Mark grabbed the nearest object, a shovel leaning against the wall, and swung it with all his might. The creature let out a sickening yelp as the blow connected, sending it sprawling to the ground. But it wasn't dead. It never seemed to die. The creature twitched, its glowing eyes still locked on Mark as it struggled to get back up. Panicking, Mark swung again, hitting it repeatedly until it stopped moving. But even then, the glow in its eyes remained, faint but persistent. As Mark stood there, breathing heavily, he realized this wasn't over. Whatever had turned these dogs into monsters wasn't natural. It was something darker, something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The next day, Mark packed up his things, grabbed Duke, and left town. He didn't look back. But even as they drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that somewhere out there the zombie dog was still waiting, still hunting. And it wasn't alone.